Welcome to Africa Today. We here live on this special place where we participate in a special event where we have a delegate for District 20 participate of special debate. Stay tuned. We will watch now that special debate. You watching now Africa Today. Remember you can watch us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and our website www.africatoday.com. Please stay tuned and you will see right now the last debate for District 20. Stay tuned. Thank you so much.
He's one of the shining stars in the legislature, and even more importantly, he's a new dad. Yeah. So let's congratulate him. Please welcome State Senator from District 20, Will Smith.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you all for my daughter. Thanks you as well. I'm running on 4 hours of sleep in the last couple of days, so thank you for that. I want to thank the sponsors of tonight's event, tonight's forum. Again, as Karen said, my name is Will Smith. I'm a state senator for District 20, and I wanted to say first thank you to the candidates that are running. This is a solemn responsibility that you've taken up, not only to serve like Janelle and David, but also to run for office. You put your names out there, you put your faces on mail, and you subject yourself to public scrutiny. So I want to say thank you to all of the candidates that have stepped up to do that. I also want to just take a few seconds to acknowledge someone who's not here tonight. She can't be here tonight, but Delegate Sheila Hickson, the chairwoman of Ways and Means, who served our community for over 40 years. And I will share, I'll never forget this, when I first got elected, she brought me in her back room and she shared a few nuggets of wisdom, and I'll just share that tonight with some of the candidates and with some of the elected officials, because she can't be here tonight to do it. First, she brought me into her office, and there were a few drinks involved, but she said that, remember that this is a temporary honor, although it wasn't so temporary for her. That this is a temporary honor, and that when you walk through the halls of Annapolis, you see lots of paintings and portraits of famous people and famous scenes that have happened throughout Maryland history, the Ark and the Dove, the first ships that carried Maryland settlers across the Atlantic. And she said that, but the most important thing that you'll see in your office is basically the barcode on your furniture. And that's a stark reminder that this is definitely a temporary situation for you. So never forget that. She said that to remember that people count on you and that constituent services are number one. She said that remember that legislating is a team sport, and that you will oftentimes have to collaborate with people across the aisle, even within your party, that you don't always get along with. So that when you think about running for office and when you think about serving and being effective when you serve, these are some of the qualities that the great Sheila Hickson gave to me and that I thought I'd pass along this evening. I'll also talk a little bit about the environment that you all will inherit in the House of Delegates. And if you were to start serving today under this current administration, you'd have to fight a governor that failed to implement paid sick leave. He vetoed paid sick leave. You'd be dealing with a governor that has an A- rating from the NRA. You'd be dealing with a governor and an opposing party that didn't take action and refused to act when we had a Syrian refugee crisis. You all remember that. Tacoma Park led the way with that. You refused to take action on the Trust Act and to fight against the Trump administration, against some really divisive and harsh immigration policy. He refused in his first weeks in office to sign legislation that would have protected our LGBTQ and transgendered brothers and sisters, including a measure that would have just allowed someone to change their birth certificate, refused to sign that. For the first time in 5 years, our schools are now out of the top spot. And that's largely because of the achievement gap and the opportunity gap between our communities of color has grown in the last 5 years under this leadership. I say all that not to make you gloomy, but to show you that the challenges are real that you are going to face in the next months and the next 4 years should you assume office. And that the responsibility that you've chosen to take on is an awesome one. And I just say that we really do owe you all a debt of gratitude for contributing to the dialogue and contributing to the diversity and the energy of our party and of our delegation here. So with that, I will say thank you again, and if we could just give them all a round of applause for what they're about to do tonight. And then finally, I'll just say thank you for the honor of serving for the last couple of years, first in the House of Delegates and then in the last 2 years in the State Senate. I'll be on the ballot, but it's been a real honor, and I know what a pleasure it's been to serve with the folks that are serving. I know that it'll be a pleasure to serve with whoever you all choose. So thank you all for the honor of being your state senator and your delegate before that. So thank you.
Aren't we proud to have him as our state senator? Yeah. Candidate that has walked in, Dana Beyer. One clap roll for Dana. Welcome, Dana. Now we're going to introduce you to some of the individuals who are sponsors. But first, I want to mention the big Women's Democratic Kiss and Make Up Party that's happening 2 days after on Thursday, June 28th. It's the Unity Party. It's the Kiss and Make Up sponsored by Women's Democratic Club. And people have asked me, why do you call it Kiss and Make Up? Is because you're going to do a lot of kissing and a lot of making up, because we are a unified Democratic Party. So we can run against each other, but once the primary is over, we are totally unified against the Republicans. It is our goal to make sure that we win every seat from top to bottom. So thank you, Women's Democratic Club, for taking the lead on this.
And the Central Committee
and the Montgomery County Democratic Central Committee. Thank you very much. I'd like to ask Emily Ackerman from the Greater Silver Spring Democratic Club and Michael Vaughn from the District 20 Breakfast Club, who are also sponsors, to please step forward. First group of questions have come from the various clubs that are participating in this event. So those questions were sent to me in advance, and then the rest of the questions will come from the audience. So the candidates are, and we'll start in alphabetical order, Fatmata Barry, Laura Trakrodian, Malik Lanzanzo, David Moon, Darian Unger, Janelle Wilkins, and George Zockel. Now, can we have a big round of applause for all of these? Today, so what we're going to do is we're going to pass the microphone to each person as they do their 2-minute opening statement. I'm sorry. We're flexible, let's change that around. When they do their 2-minute opening statement, why don't we have you come up here and introduce yourself to everyone and speak up here for 2 minutes. So why don't we start with Fatmata Barry in 2 minutes, and Bill Ackerman is your trusty timekeeper.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Before I get started, can we have a moment of silence for the young man, 41-year-old man that was shot yesterday, and killed? And I would appreciate if we could have a moment of silence for him. Thank you very much. My name is Fatmata Barry, and I am here today to ask you for your vote to be your state delegate for District 20. We have a great county and a great district, but we have challenges in education, transportation, senior services, and small business support. In education, our schools are overcrowded and they are old. We need to close the opportunity gap. Montgomery College and MCPS have homeless students, but do not have enough support and resources from the state. I will work with MC and MCPS to reduce student homelessness. We have more students on free and reduced meals than the entire DC public schools, and most are in District 20 in East County. I live in White Oak. These are indications of the systemic racism we have been fighting here in D20. We have to address special education needs with resources for teachers and training. That's part of why I went to law school. We need appropriate related services like therapy, teacher recertification, proper services and day programs, especially during the summer. We need educated students now to maintain the interest businesses have due to our educated workforce. I will work with MC and MCPS to meet the needs of all students. We need to grow our small businesses, which will provide the resources to pay for their services. As an education advocate and a special education attorney for the past 16 years, I am uniquely qualified to advocate on these issues. In transportation, I support the rapid transit of the BRT and the Purple Line, but we have many challenges coming up. I talk to small businesses, and although they're supportive of the Purple Line, they need our support. I commute from White Oak to Silver Spring and then to DC almost every day, and I know the challenges firsthand. With senior services, our senior population would double in the county by 2020. And although D20 has many opportunities for our senior housing and services, we also have many seniors who want to age in place, and they need our support. In small businesses, we need to support all our small businesses. 94%. Okay, thank you.
Go on, conclude.
Okay. So I'm asking for your vote on June 26th, early voting on Thursday starting, but I'm still here and I will take every question possible. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Laura Chergudian, and we're going to have the timekeeper put up a note for when you have 10 seconds left, okay? Great.
Good evening. Thank you to the organizers for making this happen, and thank you all for coming out today. Looking around, I see my friends and my neighbors. Our children went to school together. We served on the PTA together. You coached my children's soccer team, and I coached your children's baseball team. And then I see people that I just haven't met yet, and I look forward to becoming your friend and hopefully your representative as well. And when you look around this community, you will see the impact that I've had on this community. You'll see the farmers market, Crossroads Farmers Market, which has grown tremendously under my leadership, where farmers are using more sustainable farming practices, and everybody in our community has access to healthy, fresh, local produce. You'll see the community kitchen that we built, where you can taste now the food that's being prepared there and talk to the business owners who grew this economic opportunity because of the kitchen. And if you read Maryland law, and let's be honest, who doesn't love to do that, you'll see my influence on legislation and regulation. For example, I did the economic analysis on the criminal justice, the criminal misdemeanor diversion program. I wrote that section of the Justice Reinvestment Act, and then that passed in 2015, and now I work with state's attorneys across the state to implement that very program. I've done similar work on legislation related to police reform, related to schools, related to food policy, and mental health issues. And as much as the policy geek in me loves the legislative process, the bottom line is because of the programs that I've developed and the legislation that I've written, there are people who are living healthy, productive lives in their communities instead of in prison. There are students who are graduating from high school instead of being expelled and suspended. And there are families who have fresh vegetables on their dinner plates tonight. And I know how to get things done in Annapolis, and I'm ready to put that experience to work for you and for everybody in this community.
Thank you very much, Laura. Malik Linzanda.
Thank you very much. My name is Malik Linzanzo. I'm a father, a husband, an educator, political activist, educational activist. I'm running to be one of the 3 delegates that will lead and represent Annapolis, District 20 in Annapolis. Like many Americans, I'm concerned about the state of our country. There is some pressing issues that need to be addressed. And I'm one of those that don't just sit back, bite his tongue. I prefer to step up and do something about it, because I believe I have the skill set and the talent necessary to represent the people of District 20. So, a little bit about me. Some 25 years ago, I was in middle school. A young lady graduated from college in New Jersey. She was deported to my native country, Gabon, to teach English to underprivileged kids. I was one of those underprivileged kids. So I came in this country by myself, making my way through. I'm living the American dream. I think I'm doing good for myself. Now, I believe after 10 years working on everybody else's campaign in this district, I think it's about time for me. It's a call of duty. It's my time to step up and do something for my community. That's why I'm here to ask for your vote. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Linzanzo. David Moon.
Thank you, Karen. I'm Delegate David Moon. Let me just start off by saying the last 4 years representing you in Annapolis has truly been the honor of my life. I came to politics before doing any of this from an organizing background in the nonprofit sector for voting rights, for incarceration reform, and to be thrust into the middle of that in the era of Trump under Governor Hogan as an organizer able to deliver and resist these policies, it has been an honor, so thank you very much. But let me just say that it's pretty easy to make promises when you're stumping for office, but 4 years later, I'm very proud to say I've passed 18 bills to advance justice on a number of topics: incarceration, child care, resisting Obamacare repeal at the federal level, and I'm looking forward to doing more. In order to get this done, I made a pretty outlandish promise 4 years ago, and that's that I would try and form a progressive caucus to make common cause with my colleagues around the state to actually move these bills across the finish line. And when I put things like universal child care, paid sick leave, and rolling back the drug war and failed incarceration policies on my literature, my own kitchen cabinet thought 4 years ago that this was crazy talk and I shouldn't put it on there. But 4 years later, Maryland now leads the nation in terms of reducing its prison population, #1 in the nation. And that's thanks to a lot of the hard work from the Black Lives Matter movement, the post-Freddie Gray organizing that went on the state, and we were able to capitalize that. So we are not out of the woods yet. We still have Larry Hogan in office. He vetoed one of my bills to stop deportations of some of our residents. It didn't make the news. There's a lot of unfinished business, especially on this immigration issue, that I look forward to taking up. And starting in January 2019 with your help. I just need one vote. You got 3 of them. So please renew my contract for another 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you, David Moon. Please welcome Darian Unger.
Many of you know me already. By day, I'm a Howard University professor and environmental engineer. By night, I'm a volunteer firefighter and have been chair of the Montgomery County ACLU. My name is Darian Unger, and I would like to earn one of your votes for delegate. My experiences inform everything about my campaign and about who I am. As a firefighter and EMT, I have learned more about our community than I ever thought I would. The good, the bad, and the ugly. What I love about my work there is that we can help people on their worst days, no matter who they are. It doesn't matter their race, their color, their background, none of that matters. And I wish that more people in progressive leadership were like that. I wish that society were more like that. As chair of the ACLU, I led the fight against discrimination in all of its forms, including working to fix our systematically racist justice system. And doing that by working hard in both Rockville and Annapolis. And in my very core, I am an environmental engineer and advocate. I am the environmental candidate in this race. I was trained at MIT to be able to make a difference, to make sure that our kids have a good world and a future to live in. And do you know how much environmental legislation we were able to pass in Annapolis this past session? 0. Nothing. I was there, I was working on it with the Sierra Club. No renewable energy, nothing. We are going to change that. So I'm running a grassroots campaign with major endorsements from teachers, labor, environmental leaders, my fellow firefighters and EMTs. We are in the leading position in this race because of, not because of insider politics, not because of corporate contributions, but because of our community. And I invite your vote on June 26th. Thank you.
Thank you, Darian Unger. Please welcome Janelle Wilkins.
Hi everyone, good evening. I am Janelle Wilkins. I am one of your current
Maryland State delegates, and it has been my honor to represent you for the last year and a half. I was appointed last year after Jamie Raskin won Congress and created a series of vacancies in our district. And so I am proud to represent this district, and I'm actually proud as well to have the endorsement of Jamie Raskin. Representing you all for the last year and a half, I actually started off 2 weeks into the legislative session. Can you imagine, we have a 90-day legislative session, so jumping in 2 weeks after and having to sort of hit the ground running really quickly. Last year I was able to pass 3 bills out of the House of Delegates after introducing 5 bills, despite sort of having a late start compared to all the other members. I was proud to pass legislation dealing with racial profiling. I was proud to pass a tax credit, and then continue on that work this year by championing issues related to the ban on fracking for our environment, championing issues like climate change and 100% clean renewable energy legislation. I am proud to have a background in advocacy and organizing, and that's what I bring to the Maryland General Assembly. An organizer and advocate, and I consider myself your advocate in Annapolis. I'm proud to have stood up on issues such as championing Dreamers and their access to in-state scholarships, legislation that I defended on the House floor against Republican attacks, including wanting to say that Americans should be first in everything. I've stood up on the House floor and led legislation when it comes to expanding universal pre-K in our state. And I'm asking you for one of your 3 votes to continue to represent you and to continue to do this work in Annapolis, because we have unfinished business when it comes to the environment, when it comes to the people who are losing their health care. There is so much to do. So I ask you to help me build on the experience that I already have in representing you and getting things done. And I look forward to hopefully having the opportunity to continue to serve you. Thank you.
Welcome, George Zuckel.
Good evening, everybody. My name is George Zockel, and I am a Silver Spring attorney with about 15 years of public service in District 20 and around the state. Some of that service includes serving as a current deputy director of the Maryland Democratic Party's LGBT Council. And on the note of what Fatmata mentioned about gun violence, today is the 2nd anniversary of the Pulse nightclub shooting. Yes. So in addition to my public service, I think one thing that separates me, and just like we heard earlier that policy-wise we're all pretty much the same, but as someone who's actually a victim of gun violence, who wears this badge, and as someone who survived child sexual abuse and had that occasion haunt him for years and understood the damage that it did to me and the damage that it does to many, it makes me want to empower other people to turn victimization into activism. Because I understand what it takes to work on yourself and also serve as the legal representative for the Montgomery County Mental Health Association and look at the state's mental health resources to see that we're not making good progress. We don't have the money for it. And at the same time, there's all these underserved communities, and I can't help but think and hear the words of Meryl Streep 2 years ago from the Golden Globes when she said, and this instinct to humiliate, when it trickles down from somebody in the public platform, it kind of gives permission for other people to do the same thing. And in that moment when we're talking about the national discourse of Donald Trump making fun of a disabled person, we have to look at what we can do locally here in terms of disabled individuals. And when organizations like Progressive Neighbors have had the opportunity for 4 years to add to their mission statement the protection of persons with disability, and they have failed to do so time after time again, there's more that we can do with that regard. So we should have a party of inclusion. We should keep fighting for what we're fighting for to achieve social justice. I ask for you to elect the first openly gay male to the House of Delegates from District 20. Thank you.
So that was all of our candidates. How about a round of applause for all of our candidates? Proud District 20 people. What a great group of candidates you have here. You're a winner no matter what happens in District 20. We're going to start with the questions, and we're going to start in alphabetical order with Fatmata first. Then we'll do reverse alphabetical order because we're Democrats and we're flexible. And then we'll kind of mix it up a little bit. Before I ask the first question, I noticed we did have one more candidate who walked in the door, and we're going to stick to that one clap rule. I see that Gabe Albornoz, County Council at Large candidate, has walked in. How about one clap for Gabe? Great. Here is your first question, and these are questions that were submitted by your organizers, and the question is on transportation. What do you think about proposals to widen the Beltway? Do you have alternatives, and what strategies would you propose on a state level to improve Montgomery County's transportation system? So I'll repeat that question so you can get it again. What do you think about proposals to widen the Beltway? Do you have any alternatives, and what strategies would you propose on a state level to improve Montgomery County's transportation system? And we'll start with Fatmata Barry, and Fatmata, I will pull the microphone over to you.
Thank you very much. Simply put, I do not agree with the widening of the highway. First of all, it will do nothing except add more cars. And if the purpose is to get cars off the road, to be more environmentally conscious, that's not going to happen. Proposal, make the bus rapid transit an actual rapid transit. In other words, don't have it just be like any other bus system going down 29. I'm on 29 every day, almost every day. And having another bus on there is not going to make a difference. And as for strategies for the state level, let's change the policies. Let's make sure that when we're looking at making public transit better for people, we ask the people that will be affected. Because there are many people who want to take public transit, but it's not easy for them to get on that public transit. So therefore, I do not agree with the widening, and I believe that if we do a better job of engaging the community, we can have a better alternative. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. So I think that one of the really important things as we organize to oppose Beltway widening is that we're very clear that Beltway widening will not relieve congestion. I'm concerned when I hear people say, if we don't widen the Beltway, what alternatives will relieve congestion? We need to be very clear that Beltway widening won't. And then we need to talk about what are the other ways to move people efficiently in a way that is beneficial to our environment, in a way that is beneficial to our economy, and in a way that preserves and supports our communities. So I oppose the Beltway widening because it doesn't accomplish any of those things. It dumps more traffic onto our north-south roads as well. It's damaging to the environment, and it displaces people, and it in particular would affect the diversity of those communities. So what else? We instead invest $9 billion into all kinds of multimodal transportation. So we make BRT work, we make the Purple Line work, we make telecommuting work, we make the Brunswick Line running on 270 work on a more regular basis so that people aren't coming into this area and getting on the Beltway.
Thank you.
So the answer to the first question is no. I will disagree with Governor Hogan for expanding the highway or any other road. Why? Because if we do that now, the next 10 or 20 years, we will come back and try to do the same thing again. So how wide do you want to go? I believe the alternative solution to this is to bring the best of our engineers together and try to think about a better transportation way. We can look at some example, like for example in Japan or in France or even China, they have a high-speed train, because the issue here is actually how a family can go from their place of work back to their family on time. So we have to have better ways to move. I don't believe that the Organ proposal is the best one.
You're not going to find any disagreement from me on this. I think this $10 billion, I think it's probably closer to $10 billion and upwards of new asphalt and highway widening that Governor Hogan is proposing is absolutely ludicrous. And if you care about this issue, the easiest way to stop this plan in its tracks is to make sure that Governor Hogan does not get reelected this November. This is his plan. He did it without consulting the General Assembly. arbitrarily, it's completely unilateral, and it's going to tie up state transportation resources for years, no matter the fact that he's claiming that this is all going to be paid for by private money. $10 billion, supposedly, of private money. I don't buy that for a second. And when you look at Virginia, which tried to implement these types of Lexus toll lanes that he's proposing in Maryland, these things, we've seen up to $40 tolls in peak congestion hours. So I honestly don't think this is a feasible plan at all. And all past evidence on highway widening shows this is just going to induce more traffic and sprawl. Long-term solutions, I agree with Mark. I've been fighting to get WMATA to restore metro hours that were cut during its safe track period. It has not done so yet, and without service reliability, we need to be able to get people back onto these trains by fixing all of these problems. So that's where we should be putting $9 billion.
I think that we'll find no disagreement between the candidates on the issue of do we widen the Beltway. No way, hell no. That's not the question. Personally, in addition to being stuck in traffic all the time, it's a very personal one for me. One of my brother firefighters was killed last year on a highway during a rescue, and I would like to never pull someone out of another car wreck on there again. There are, of course, alternatives. That's one of the reasons why I championed public transportation and the Purple Line for years. That is part of a beltway by train, right? Personally, I wish that that we had public transit all the way around and had a circumferential route. There are many alternatives, ranging from public transportation to more thoughtful development, so we have jobs closer to where people work. All of them are on the table, and all of them are better than widening the Beltway.
Thank you. This is a great question. I've been getting a number of emails and calls into my office and making sure that I am responsive to constituents around this. I want you to raise your hand if Governor Hogan or his administration consulted you about the Beltway widening. Anyone? And that is unacceptable. Even my office as a legislator representing this area received no communication or no opportunity to provide input or feedback with the governor before he made this proposal. That's why back in November, both David and I stood before his administration and said no to this Beltway widening and asked a number of questions to which we did not receive adequate responses. I'm extremely concerned about this, and I want to make sure that everyone understands that this is not something that the legislature has approved, and we all need to galvanize and make sure that we're contacting the governor to stop it. And second, if we're unable to do that, I will introduce legislation next year to ensure that we stop this Beltway widening. And finally, I think that we need to look at the results of the Purple Line, allow the Purple Line implementation to help get cars off the road to reduce congestion. Thank you.
So Montgomery County is the only county in the U.S. that signed what's called the Under 2 Coalition. It is an international treaty that promises to reduce carbon emissions by the year 2050. Widening the Beltway runs contrary to our county's mission. Just like Delegate Moon just spoke about the frustrations of getting metro funding. If I'm elected, one thing I would agree on is with the 60% of Marylanders who want the legalization of marijuana to take place recreationally, I would introduce legislation that would create a transportation fund that stems from the revenue from the legalization. In terms of pavement, if we're adding any new pavement in District 20 or in Montgomery County, it should be climate resilience programs for cooling pavement, not more carbon emissions on the Beltway. So let's get Larry Hogan out of there in November.
We should increase, decrease, or keep our state taxes and other taxes at the same level, and why?
No. I was speaking to a senior citizen here in Tacoma Park, and prior to coming here, actually at Mark's Kitchen, and she was talking about taxes, talking about the frightening possibility that they're going to increase property taxes here in the state, talking about limited incomes, the fear of not being able to age in place, the fear of all these new programs they're trying to propose at the county level and state level without any revenue to pay for them. So we are in this very difficult scenario where we're demanding more services. We have more projects to pay for, but we can't pay for them. Our county's $120 million in the hole. We have a governor who doesn't fund Montgomery County the way he should, and so senior citizens should be scared. And so, no, I think that we need to look at different tax brackets. You know, we had the federal tax plan that directly impacted Montgomery County and makes Larry Hogan look better. So we have to make Larry Hogan look bad and make him act on behalf of seniors in a better way than he's doing now.
Sorry, we're doing reverse order, so Janelle will be moving next.
Thank you so much for the question. I think this is extremely relevant right now, especially given the issue of taxes and the impact on our state when it comes to the GOP tax plan. We have actually had to take action as a legislature to mitigate the impacts that the GOP tax scam really will have in our state. So this legislative session, one of the things that we did is that the GOP tax plan actually removed personal exemptions. And we made sure that we put that back in here in the state of Maryland, and that actually keeps $800 million in the pockets of Marylanders. It affects 92% of Maryland filers. In addition, we've increased the standard deduction here in our state so that filers are able to actually take out more in terms of the standard deduction. And that's something, again, that will impact so many Marylanders and ensure that we keep the money in the pockets of Marylanders. And that's what I intend to do. Make sure you mitigate those federal impacts and do even more to keep that money in your pockets. Thank you.
Oh, I can't be out of time already.
Move quickly.
I actually propose reducing property taxes, and let me explain why. Can anyone explain to me why, when we have an affordable housing crisis, and when retirees are having trouble being able to stay here because of high property taxes, that while that is happening, we are not taxing industrial carbon pollution at all, not one whit? I propose reversing this. Right? I want to reduce property taxes so people can afford to live here, and make up for that revenue by taxing and putting a carbon fee and dividend system on carbon pollution so that we can actually fight climate change for real. That is a substantive change. If we do that, we could be to renewable energy, our state could be to renewable energy what Massachusetts was for healthcare. A state that pioneers something new and sets the model for the federal government 2 years hence, right? So that we can actually fight climate change for real. Thanks.
So the question was asked whether I would vote to raise or decrease taxes on folks. The question was not asked for which taxpayers. And so let me be very specific here. Since the beginning of my time as a candidate in 2013, I've pointed out the fact that Maryland has cut taxes for millionaires. It has cut estate taxes for people inheriting up to $6 million, and it has done so at a revenue loss of $250 million a year to our state budget, all at a time when we've been in deficit. That's $1 billion of voluntary tax cuts that we gave in trickle-down economics to the wealthiest residents during the recession in Maryland under Democratic control. And so, as I've sat here in Annapolis, we have given tax cuts while I've been there. Guess who got them? People buying super luxury yachts. The casinos, MGM and Arundel Live, got 2 back-to-back tax cuts my last 2 years, and only 20 or 30 of us vote against these bills. And so I'm ready to continue in 2019, forming resistance to these policies and making sure that people who can get tax cuts are the middle-class, low-income folks who are actually in need, not the fat cats. Thank you.
Well, if you want a straightforward leader, I am one. Should you increase taxes? The answer is no, and no discussion, because there's nothing wrong with the tax that we have right now. Unless, like Darren said, if it's something that will harm our community, like carbon emission, that is the area we can put tax on because the consequences of it. But, you know, if you go around, and for some people who have been campaigning around here, most of our homeowners complains about the increase of taxes. And I'm not gonna allow that kind of increase in taxes happen when I'm your delegate. Thank you.
So I want to, there's several different kinds of taxes. There's the personal income tax that I think we've talked a lot about. We made some progress in the last year at increasing the earned income tax credit. There's more that we can do to increase the earned income tax credit and overall make our personal income tax process much more progressive. It's surprisingly progressive in the state. But I want to talk about corporate taxes because multi-state, multinational corporations are not paying their fair share in this state right now. And small businesses and medium-sized businesses that are based primarily in the state or only in the state are paying more than their fair share. And so that is both an issue in terms of income, but it's also an issue in terms of prioritizing. If we really want to prioritize small local business, we've got to balance how taxes are paid from a corporate perspective. So two specific taxes that we need to look at. One is we need to institute the throwback tax that taxes the nowhere income that these multi-state corporations manage to have and not have taxed anywhere. And the second is combined reporting, which right now without that, companies are able to hide profits in states like Delaware and not pay their taxes here.
Thank you. Simply put, no raising taxes. 94% of our businesses in Montgomery County have less than 50 employees. That's all businesses, which means the majority of our businesses here are small businesses. So we need to grow the small businesses that we have. We need to develop them, and that's where we'll get our resources. We do not need to raise any more new taxes because all it will do is harm those who cannot afford it, which is a lot of us in this county. So that is my answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, candidates. I just walked in the door and we will use the one clap rule again. Please welcome Will Jawando, who's running for council at large. One clap. Great, welcome. Okay, the next question is on education, and we will start with Laura Chakrudian on this question. What strategies can the state legislature implement to reduce the achievement or opportunity gap? I'll repeat the question. What strategies can the state legislature implement to reduce the achievement and opportunity gap?
So thank you for the question. I've worked for years on the issue of the school-to-prison pipeline and reforming the way discipline is done in our schools, and that's a small piece of the opportunity gap. I intend to continue the work I've done over many years and the progress that we've made on that. The other things that we need to do is to fully fund the recommendations of the Kerwin Commission. And so this means universal pre-K for all 4-year-olds, means tested for 3-year-olds, and then we need to continue to fund more and more early childhood education, high-quality early childhood education, making it available for everybody. That's the most important investment. We need to invest in after-school programs. We need to invest in summer programs to address the summer slide that happens for children that don't have opportunities that can be paid for over the summer. And we need to invest in and build on the model of community schools. Community schools bring resources into the school so that children's other needs, food needs, mental health needs, support needs, laundry needs, are taken care of so that teachers can focus on learning and children can focus on teachers can focus on teaching and children can focus on learning.
Thank you so much. First of all, I'm the only candidate here with a background in education. I've been working in the education system over the last 11 years. And I'm glad that this time I'm going to stand up and replace another great educator, Sheila Hickson, that just stepped down. I think we need a strong voice, somebody who understands education in and out, and I will be that person. And I'm not just an educator, I'm also a data analyst by trade. So what I'm going to be doing to close the achievement gap is to make sure we will use the data where kids are underperform. We will put them together and so we can allocate resources targeting those areas and those underprivileged schools. So that is the first way that we will address the achievement gap. The second one is to make sure that our teachers also are treated as lawyers or doctors, because they're as important as these people. So we have to treat our teachers good and make sure they have good pay so that they can prepare the next generation of our kids. Thank you.
Thank Thank you. The achievement gap is obviously one of the more difficult problems to quote, solve that we would see in Montgomery County. On the funding piece, which we obviously know we need, I will point out we do have a ballot initiative, a constitutional amendment that's going to be on the ballot this November, and it's to finally lockbox casino revenues to actually supplement education funding in Maryland instead of just displacing the money we're already spending. That's on the ballot this November and should add hundreds of millions of dollars to the state's education budget in order to finance some of the strategies we want for tackling the achievement gap. The other part of this that I would say that is the trickier sociological problem is that it's very difficult for me to look at the achievement gap and separate it from residential segregation in Montgomery County, which we all know it's just as segregated as DC with its northwest-southeast divide. You could draw the same line in Montgomery County and find similar results. So until we're willing to have the difficult conversations around boundaries, around which schools are lumped into consortia together, I really think we're spinning wheels, and we've got to start making the hard conversations on that.
I was endorsed enthusiastically by the teachers of Montgomery County because of my work on funding public education and my emphasis on reducing the achievement gap. This is an absolutely critical issue, and there are several parts that come into play. First, as chair of the ACLU, we have seen this as a civil rights issue when we see the achievement gap. It's bigger than just a question of funding. But we'll start with the funding. First of all, state funding for education has gone from 21% of the state budget to 18% of the state budget. That is the wrong direction. And mind you, that's over 6 years, so we can't even just blame Hogan for that, right? That's with Democrats there too. So we begin with increasing funding rather than decreasing funding for education. And from a state level, we can apply strings to that funding because as a parent, with kids in school and with my kids, their friends, all the kids that we see in the school, we see this issue happening in front of our eyes. And we can, and if we actually incentivize Montgomery County and other counties around the state to distribute their money more equally among schools that actually need it, rather than sending it, for example, to Potomac, we can actually solve this problem from the state level with a little bit of pressure. Thanks.
Thank you so much for this great question. This is especially important because our work ahead is magnanimous. I serve on the Ways and Means Committee. So any issue dealing with education actually goes through our committee. And right now, the biggest thing that is taking place is the Kerwin Commission, where we are taking a look at our funding formula and making sure that every single school has the resources it needs to succeed. And we're not stopping there. We're also taking a look at policy change and how we make systemic changes all across the state to ensure that schools have the adequate resources that they need. One of the top priorities that I have around education that I've already started working on is around universal pre-K. I am an immigrant from Kingston, Jamaica. And in Jamaica, I was able to start strong and early, and that propelled me ahead, even despite not always going to the best schools. And I believe in universal pre-K. So that, along with other legislation around trauma that I've introduced, legislation around supporting English learners, I want to continue this work because the work ahead on education is great. Thank you.
I too agree that we should fully fund education as is stated in the Kerwin Commission report, but I also understand at the same time, when we don't have the funding to put forth, we have to think outside of the box. And what I did when I worked for the Archdiocese of Baltimore in the Office of Child and Youth Protection for 2 years was we created safer environments for children and youth. And we helped adults and students recognize signs of child sexual abuse and added mental health resources towards our schools. And so when I'm walking on front porches at Tacoma Park, and porch after porch has paintings and signs written by students who are afraid of guns, that tells me that in the absence of funds, we have to invest in greater mental health resources for our students to eliminate academic pressure, to prevent bullying, to get more resources in our schools so once the money comes for programs, kids are healthy to receive those programs and be the best versions of themselves. Because gun violence and mental health are inextricably linked. And we have a very bad dilemma going on in this country and we had to stop it. So mental health resources and wellness programs for our kids. Thank you.
So that's an educational advocate and a special ed attorney for the last 16 years. I can say that I have the background to deal with this issue. We talk about the achievement gap and the opportunity gap. It's simple. Children who have special needs, children who are in schools that are below level, need the resources. That's it. We say achievement gap. We also search opportunity gap, and that's because the resources that need to be in the schools where children have been serviced are not there. That means we take the funding that we have directed to schools, we put them to direct services. That means that when at the end of the day, we look at our children in the eye, we can say we did everything we can for you. We did everything we can to make sure that you grow and that you become successful. I have special education students that I worked with who are now adults and are functioning. It can happen, and we need to change the dialogue, and we need to make sure that when we look at our children, we look at them with pride.
Our next question will start with Malik. However, Tony and okay, what would a forum be without an economic development question? And the next question is on economic development, and we'll start with you, Malik. In the last couple of years, our economic development program has been very limited. What steps, if any, do you believe that state legislators can take to improve this situation? What can we do to promote small business? I'll repeat that. In the last couple of years, our economic development program has been limited. What steps do you believe that state legislators can take to improve this situation? And what can we do to promote small business?
Thank you very much. Very important question. Now, I think one of the most important question here is poverty. And it looks like the same groups that are affected by poverty never really see the economics growth. That's the proven truth. So what we have to do is to make sure that the West, in the way we wasting money in this country is ridiculous. What we can do on the legislative level is to make sure that we create a fund to help minorities to create businesses. That is the only way we can jumpstart the economy. Because if we only give incentives like the one we give to Amazon, we will always find ourselves in a situation where the underserved community will still suffer for the economic growth. So we have to find a way to jumpstart the economy by investing in those people who actually need the help. Thank you.
Thanks. Let me answer this question two ways. One is directly with money, and the other's not directly with money. Not directly with money, I obviously am on the progressive side of this argument and believe we should be investing in infrastructure, education, and a high quality of life so that employers want to locate here and their employees want to live here. They're highly trained, recruitable workforce here in the area. On the money question, I mean, if I could snap my fingers, what I would wish is that any time the government is about to hand off money to a corporation, it is required to do an analysis that says, if we gave the same amount of money to a range of small and medium-sized businesses, what would the economic impact of that be? While I've been in Annapolis, I voted against multiple bills that passed that give Pentagon contractors millions of dollars out of the state treasury. The nonpartisan legislative analysts on one of them had said this is an ineffective tax credit that does not actually generate new R&D for weapons development, so why are we giving this money to Pentagon contractors who don't need it? That $20 million spread out over small and medium-sized businesses we know would be turned around into the local economy, so help me get there.
I'm glad this question came up. If this question is important for you, then I'm the candidate for you. Let me tell you about what I do. Yeah, I'm an environmental engineer, but I teach at Howard University in the School of Business. And what I do is I help my students not just develop new, ideally environmental energy technologies, fuel cells, energy efficient light bulbs, solar panels, but I also teach them how to start new companies. And so there's a lot of entrepreneurship that goes into it. And we spin off small businesses. It is empowering for the students, soon to be business leaders, and it is fantastic for whichever state or sometimes DC gets to host them and gets to be their homes. We should be their homes, and there are many steps that we can do because to attract them to Maryland for just a fraction of the cost of the billions that we are offering to give away to Amazon. A lot of it is about linking my students to capital. That's all we've got to do. They are sharp as tacks. They are going to make millions, and they're going to make millions for our state. We just need to give them the chance to do it here. Thanks.
In order to spur economic development at the state level, we absolutely have to invest in our small businesses. Small businesses are the economic engine of our state, but sometimes you wouldn't be able to tell it based on some of the legislation that comes across my desk. Legislation that focuses too much on the big businesses and too much on the Marriotts to ensure that Marriott and other groups get these tax cuts. They're always coming back for more. But one of the things that I do in the Maryland General Assembly is I stand with several other legislators to say no and stand up against these tax credits. We had one bill this legislative session that seemed like a good idea at first and would bring some money back to the state of Maryland, but included a huge gaping tax cut for Marriott. And so only a handful of legislators voted against that, but I was proud to stand up against that legislation in our state. What we have to do in order to support small businesses, and legislation that I plan to introduce, is making sure that we have small business liaisons at the state level who work closely with our small business and our community to make sure that they have the support that they need, that they have the advice and the guidance, help with their books. The issues that small businesses have told me through conversations here in District 20 that they need help and support with, the state needs to step up. So thank you.
The driving force of Montgomery County's population is immigration, and immigration should be the driving force of our growing economy for a number of reasons. When I'm door knocking yesterday, I meet a woman named Celeb who's from Eritrea, and she's a single mother of 5, and she's recently came to the United States, and she said, "I'm a good cook, George. I want to open a restaurant." And I tell her, "Well, let me tell you, there's resources out there for you, and I'll help you find them." We have to invest in better resources to boost our minority business enterprise so people understand how they can access these resources. We should also amend the state procurement code to add LGBT-owned businesses to the MDE program. And that way we're celebrating our diversity in District 20, because we are majority minority, and we should be celebrating all those talents that we have. And so we have to, in an era of Trump politics who wants to kick everybody out, we want to rake them all in and not just bring everybody in, but empower them. And empower them to be a part of our local economy and celebrate who we are. Thank you.
Thank you. Right here in District 20, we have some of the best small businesses in the county. We have 94% of all businesses in Montgomery County are small businesses. Why? Because they have less than 50 employees. We need to build our small businesses in the line of the corporate line. I have spoken to these businesses, and these businesses have host meetings, community meetings, and they need our help. They need our help severely. And those are the people that you have to consider when you talk about taxes and you talk about services and you talk about providing incentives to businesses. These are the people that you need to think about, because they serve us, they serve our community, and they do well for us, and we need to do the same for them. Thank you.
Unfortunately, this state and this county has prioritized the model of economic development, which we call smokestack chasing, which is running after the big smokestacks and seeing if we can attract them to come here. as opposed to pollinating, which is looking at the skills that we have and the entrepreneurs that we have right here in our own community and finding the ways to grow and pollinate those businesses. And we have denizens right here as an example of one that we should be pollinating. Thank you for all your work in our community. And so the work that I've done over the last 10 years has really been focused on building structures and systems to support pollinating the local businesses. And so that has included, I've passed legislation to increase access to credit. I've built local programs to increase access to credit for small businesses. I built a community kitchen, George, I hope you sent her to us, where people who have incredible skill and incredible talent and incredible drive but don't have the assets can get their small food businesses started and get them off the ground and graduate into other places. And I want to expand on and build on these models with food hubs and other similar shared use infrastructure that can really grow the incredible talent that we have right here. We don't have to spend our time chasing those smokestacks.
Great. We'll start the next set of questions with Mr. David Moon here. What can the state do, and what would you do to increase housing for low-income families? Low-income, not moderate income, is expressly mentioned here.
So I actually live pretty close to a subsidized housing project in Tacoma Park, and I can't remember, I took a tour of it in my first year in office and asked how much it cost. It was millions of dollars to get those units online for a few dozen families. So in terms of creating direct housing, it is an expensive proposition. And I honestly don't think we get there unless we rein in our budget situation, which includes, as I mentioned, $1 billion in giveaways. Structural deficits for years to come are projected. And so that's problem number one. Problem number two is we obviously have raging debates throughout Montgomery County, and you see them injected into the county debates, so I might be making a mistake injecting myself into the raging county debates, but they all gravitate around the same issue. Density, affordable housing, getting developers to pitch in more, increasing that, and to do it near transit, where we all know it costs hundreds of thousands of dollars if you have the luxury of living right on a metro station. So I honestly believe that's the direction we need to head in. We need more transit. We need more housing located near transit. We need to impose that on the developers, and without making the projects unfeasible. And we need to, of course, raise the revenues through the sources I mentioned to get that done.
This is a very personal issue for me and my family. We feel very lucky to be able to live in Montgomery County, and we know how hard it is for many of our neighbors and many other people who would love to be here but can't. There are several key things that the state can and should do to increase affordable housing in our area and in the state. The first, as I proposed before, with an environmental bent, is to reduce property taxes, because when you have an affordable housing crisis and people can't afford to live here, making it more expensive to live here doesn't make sense. I'd rather earn that revenue from taxing carbon pollution than by pricing people out of the area. But in order to do that, we have to make sure that it doesn't just benefit property owners. We have to include a rebate system so that it actually gets to many of the renters who also live here as well. So that, in combination with strengthening requirements for only just cause eviction to protect renters, is also critically important, both of which we can do from the state level. Thanks.
Thank you. I really appreciate this question because I took action legislatively, this year around affordable housing. I introduced a bill that passed the House of Delegates specifically dealing with sustainable communities, which is a designation that we have all around Montgomery County, that to be a sustainable community, you're able to benefit from a lot of different tax incentives and benefit from various economic development here in our state. But what I realized is that in applying to be a sustainable community, affordable housing is not one of the considerations. That means for one of our most desirable designations all across our state, jurisdictions are able to apply and win this designation without even considering affordable housing in our communities. So I was very proud to work with the University of Maryland to introduce that bill and work together on it. The Center for Smart Growth passed that bill out of the House of Delegates. I also addressed the issue dealing with just cause eviction. That was my legislation this year. We have to look at renters and the condition of renters when we talk about affordable housing, because what happens is when people lose their housing, they have nowhere to go. It's critical that we address that, and I'll be chairing a study in the legislative interim around just cause eviction and bring that legislation back for passage with your support. Thank you.
In 2013, the Montgomery County Council appointed me to serve on the Children's Panel, where I advocated for affordable housing for foster youth entering adulthood. And one way we advocated was to think of creative ideas outside of the box and think of vulnerable populations like foster youth and senior citizens. And so we looked at programs like were being explored in Oregon, and we thought, what if it was possible to combine those two together because of limited resources, to combine foster youth housing with seniors. So that's one idea, is building these partnerships amongst vulnerable populations to create existing housing. Number two, we have roughly 800 homeless people in Montgomery County. Our county council has been, and members of the council has been fighting hard for those homeless people. We need to get them into houses and not on the corner of East-West Highway where I see them every day. And we have to form better partnerships with our council and state legislature to make that happen. And if I'm elected, I will see to it. Thank you.
Stick to alphabetical order, but thank you for being over anxious here. Our candidates are very excited about tonight.
Simply put, Tacoma Park has rent stabilization. So that helps this community. White Oak Science Gateway Master Plan, for those who don't know, I live in White Oak. That could bring gentrification in White Oak. And that is what I would like to address, which is to promote the rent stabilization we have here in Tacoma Park and White Oak for those who live there, to make sure that they are protected. That's a community that has a lot of renters. We have a lot of high rises, we have a lot of garden apartments. If the gentrification comes down there, many people will be displaced. And that is something that no one is really talking about, but there's a community right now who could be impacted by gentrification. And hopefully, as a state delegate, I can address that with the county. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So a number of the things that, some of which have been addressed, I think we need to talk about funding and specifically leveraging federal funding and finding ways to do a better job of leveraging federal tax credits specifically that are designed to build new low-income housing, using inclusionary zoning, but making sure that the low-income housing that's being built is for people with very low incomes, not just the moderately priced incomes. We need to improve the quality of current affordable housing. Right now, a lot of housing is affordable because it's not very good quality, and there's money that we can invest and support landlords to improve that quality and not increase the rent. We also need to pass the HOME Act to prevent discrimination based on the source of income, so people using Section 8 vouchers can get a home anywhere. Just cause eviction, of course. We need to invest funds in the program that allows lower income new homeowners to buy their first home. And then we can't ignore the fact that this is part of a broader economic justice issue. We need to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. We need family leave. We need to support strong unions. We need to support prevailing wages, collective bargaining, because when people have good quality jobs and good stable income, then they're more likely to be able to afford housing that's there.
I believe home ownership is actually the backbone of a sustainable community. And I think sometimes we have to ask real questions. You have on one side homeowners, and the other side is renters. Unfortunately, most minorities don't own homes. And if you take a home as something that you can use later on to send your kid to college, if those communities don't own nothing, it's going to be the same poverty circle that will continue. So we have to make sure that that issue is pinpoint and we solve the problem from the root. Because you go around here, first of all, when you say community, it means that you own something. You own the businesses. When you go around here, most black community that is not a community, they're neighborhoods. Because they only have renters. And that is something that we have to have a leader with courage to speak to the issue and use data. Like, I use data to drive decision-making operation. Thank you.
And that's why I want to represent District 20 as a state delegate. As an educational advocate, as an immigration attorney, as a special education attorney, I have the experience as a small business owner who owns a small law firm in downtown Silver Spring. I understand the issues in this county, in this district, and I have the unique skills and ability to represent your interest in Annapolis. Thank you.
We had a chance to touch on several important issues tonight, but the one thing that we didn't get to talk about is constituent services. And that's a really crucial piece of the role of a state delegate, is advocating on behalf of individuals and advocating on behalf of communities with state agencies. I spent years locally advocating with State Highway Administration to get the crosswalk in Tacoma Junction. You can now walk across it. I was part of that movement. And State Highway Administration is one of the groups that you're going to need your delegates to be advocating on your behalf with. Over the last year since I've been campaigning, I have found people who have needs as I've knocked on their doors, and I have had potholes filled, and I have had parking issues resolved, and I have helped people figure out how to file a complaint with a nursing home that was abusing this woman's sister, and I help people figure out how to get services for their children. And I could go on, but the point is that what I want to ask you to do is to not just look at what it is we're saying we're going to do, but look at what it is that we have actually accomplished, and look at what we have actually accomplished in our legislative, in the legislative work we've done, even if we haven't been in the legislature, in the community infrastructure that we've built, and in the constituent services that we've provided.
My friend, thank you so much. I think this is a very excellent process. I love it. I enjoy all of you. Most of you open the door, bring me in to listen to my position, and I really appreciate that. It should be a very easy process. You're a candidate, more people vote for you, you are elected. You don't have to be a lawyer or a PhD to put together legislation. I'm an educator, and I know what I'm talking about. We have to make our laws simple. Those of you who are Christian, you use the Bible. It doesn't matter whether you're a PhD or the Bible is simple. Don't kill means don't kill. It doesn't say unless you're a police officer. I'm the kind of delegate that will put together laws, simple laws, that make everybody understand. I don't know about you. How many of you understand the tax law? I don't. Why is that the tax law is so difficult if it's made for us? So we have to cut all of this nonsense, excuse my language. We have to make everything possible and accessible to everyone to be a part of this process. So again, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Well, thanks for sticking it out with us till 9 p.m., folks. So let me just reiterate. I feel like here I am, days before ballots are cast, and I'm concluding a 4-year experiment. And that experiment is something that people said couldn't be done when I first ran, and that's whether you could be a progressive agitator, whether you could govern with your heart, and whether you could speak truth to power, even when your own party is doing wrong, and still be effective in Annapolis. Well, guess what? They made me a subcommittee chair. I've gotten 18 bills passed. I did all that while voting down some of the bad bills the party put forward and forming a progressive caucus. There's a lot more work to get done, but you can talk about my dozens of organizing, or sorry, you can read about you can talk about them too, after you read about them. If you visit davidmoon.org, I've got endless articles about my work and bill summaries and things like that, so please check it out. And in 2 days, vote early. Once again, you have 3 votes. I just need 1 of them. Thank you.
Hey, thank you all for coming. And I want you, my neighbors, to walk away with highlights of why you should vote for me among the 3. Our early and strong community support led to major endorsements from teachers, from labor, from environmentalists, and from my fellow firefighters and EMT. My leading position in this race and experience as a proven fighter for our community, for our environment, on social justice issues throughout, will make me your strongest representative in Annapolis. I don't take corporate contributions, and I will always choose people over politics. I'm Darian Unger. Please do vote, and please have 1 of your votes be for me. Thank you very much for coming out tonight.
I want to thank everyone as well for coming out tonight. I really appreciate all of your time, and again, for sticking out till 9 o'clock. Again, I'm Janelle Wilkins, and it has been my pleasure to represent this district for the last year and a half. Over the last several hours that we've been answering questions, what I've been working to convey to you is the work that I've been doing in Annapolis on your behalf. How I've been working in Annapolis to build coalition around issues, to also stand up and say no when we need to, even when it is very tough, especially as a freshman legislator. I've said no and stood up to leadership on issues like more mandatory minimums. I've stood up on issues like greater tax cuts for corporations such as Marriott that I talked about earlier. I've stood up around the environment in particular and working on the clean energy bill, building coalition around that, and being able to help pass our override to the governor's veto of the ban on fracking last year. I want to continue to advocate for you and stand up for our community. So I ask you for 1 of your votes out of the 3 that you will make starting on Thursday during early voting. Thank you so much for your time. I hope to continue to represent you and be your advocate in Annapolis. Thank you.
When I first filed to run, I said I wanted to change the way government works because unlike the county council, the state legislature adopts a policy that nearly 1/3 of it is selected and not elected by you. And then I was able to analyze, what it is within my policies and my experiences that I want to pursue. And again, to reiterate, it's to empower people and survivors like myself who have gone through abuse, who have gone through gun violence, and stand together as an army of survivors. And in my army who endorsed me is U.S. Congressman Tim Ryan, Charles County President Board of Commissioners Peter Murphy on my regional governance approach, Virginia Delegate Mark Levine based on my transparency in government, small business owners we know here, Adavia Toro from El Golfo, Cubano's Restaurant, Trattoria Delina, Marcella's a good friend of mine, Gari Kebab, and the list goes on. And so it is Pride Month. And if I'm elected, I will be the first ever openly gay male elected from District 20. Nobody believes that, but it's a truth. And so please elect George Zockel for 1 of your 3 votes. Thank you.
Thank you to the candidates from transportation to public safety to immigration to taxes. The candidates have been questioned tonight and they've risen to the occasion. Aren't you proud to be residents of District 20? How about a big round of applause for everyone, all the candidates here tonight. Thank you.
When I got in, I went to see the late, great Senator from Prince George's County, Gwendolyn Britt, who was really quite a figure. She had been involved in the desegregation of Glen Echo Amusement Park in that famous 1960 campaign when she was a student at Howard. She belonged to a group called the Nonviolent Action Group, NAG. And they said they were going to nag everybody until they desegregated Maryland and Washington, D.C. And so anyway, I went to see her because she'd been putting in the felon reenfranchisement bill for a decade, and I said, Gwen, I got elected running on this. I would like to help out. Let me know if there's anything I can do. And she said, great. So just 3 weeks later, she came to see me. And I had not spoken on the floor of the Senate before. And those of you who are already in office know it's a big deal when you speak on the floor for the first time. It's like the first time you get called on in class and you get to speak in front of everybody, And I had not spoken yet. And Gwen came back to me. She said, Jamie, we got the ex-felon voting bill out of committee, and it's coming to the floor, and we want you to be the floor leader. And I said, oh my God. I'm so honored and moved and delighted. She said, well, don't be that honored. You're the only white senator willing to do it. So I was like, all right, well, hey, I'll take it however I can get it. And so the Republican minority leader gets up and says, the Democrats want to give voting rights back to murderers, rapists, armed robbers, arsonists, and kind of reads down the list of felonies. And Gwen, who sat in front of me, turned around and said, okay, it's your turn. You can get up now. But luckily, I had an argument for them, and it was based on having knocked on 17,000 doors in D20. And I got up and I said, well, the vast majority of people who are going to be re-enfranchised under our legislation, unlike the people you're talking about who are never going to get out of prison, are in for non-violent offenses. And I said, take one of my constituents, for example, Jack Abramoff. Okay? Now, Jack, who lives in the beautiful Burke Mills section of Silver Spring, has just gone off to federal prison for 6 years for offenses against democracy. And if anybody should be disenfranchised for life, surely it's somebody who's committing crimes against the electoral process and fair representation. And so I said, but on our side of the aisle, we do believe that the purpose of punishment is rehabilitation. And so we will stand up for the voting rights of even a hardened ex-felon like Jack Abramoff, my constituent. So everybody wanted to speak up for the Jack Abramoff Voting Rights Act. We passed it by 2 votes that day. It went over to the House side, they passed it, and we re-enfranchised 88,000 Marylanders.
Okay, we just welcome to Afrique today. We just finished the debate. What you can say about this debate?
Hey, listen, I think that was a great debate. I think I did pretty good. We're looking forward for people to register and vote. This is real, and this is the last month. Early voting is June 14th, June 21st. Primary is June 26th. You have to register and vote. That's the way we will win this and go to Annapolis to change a lot of laws and pass some laws that will benefit the community. So again, I call you on being engaged on my campaign and to make sure on June 14 we early vote, and then 21 and on the primary we all everybody come in mass and trying to make this happen.
Okay, and what you can say the last word for the people who didn't come today?
Listen, you missed out. This is one of the best debate, and you can see the turnout is incredible. People came out. It's unfortunate that some people have to go to work, but the bottom line is it wasn't so good. I mean, the response for the people is amazing, and we hope that this performance will bring even more people to the poll to vote for me. Vote Malik Lenzanzo. That's the only name you should remember. On the primary, June 26th, you have to vote for Malik Lenzanzo.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Yeah.